I mean, I hate to call it a trigger, but my parents divorced. But not only did my parents divorce, my grandfather was like the patriarch of our family. And so at the age of 12, he passed away from lung cancer. And not long after that, I had my first drink.
The family tends to be at a disadvantage. They've gotten less help all along. So when the addict goes to treatment, the family gets that one phone call a week, where the addict alcoholic has gotten 24-hour, 7-day-a-week help, and literally can manipulate the family with good stuff, good information to their advantage, where the family needs to really catch up and transition from just family member to recovery.
The recovery piece has its limitations. The 12-step piece, it got me so far, but I recognized at a certain point, it's not helping everyone.
There is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily a train, and it's providing people with that hope and understanding that things can get better.
She found me, somehow she located where I was and knocked on the door and asked me if I wanted some help. Was the very beginning of me seeking some kind of help for my substance use problem.
This is the Recovery Guide podcast with Michael Herbert, where powerful stories and actionable insights empower individuals on their recovery journey to build resilience and make a lasting impact. I'm glad you're here, so let's get started. Today our guest is Tommy McGee, licensed mental health counselor. I've known Tommy for the past 20 years. We've worked together in agencies, and also we collaborate in our private practices. He works with individuals and couples. He practices EMDR as part of his therapy practice. We're going to talk about religion, spirituality. We also are going to talk about culture, the disease of addiction, and how it affects families and couples. This is going to be a great conversation, and I know you'll enjoy it. All right, Tommy, thanks for joining the Recovery Guide podcast. Let's get started. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about what got you into recovery? How did you wind up in recovery and working in the field of addiction and mental health?
The recovery piece, I could tell a million stories about what got me in recovery, because it's like a train wreck, but it's like a long story. The very end part of it is interesting that, I would say my mom intervened on me. I think about that because she just passed away last year.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And thank you. And she found me, somehow she located where I was because I was kind of running, doing my thing, and knocked on the door and asked me if I wanted some help. Pretty much that was the very beginning of me seeking some kind of help for my substance use problem, because I went from that knock to treatment in Florida, because I'm originally from Dallas, Texas, to treatment in Florida, and just accepted this whole concept of recovery.
So how did you, why Florida?
That's what my mom chose. Because at the point where she asked me whether or not I needed some help, she took care of everything, and if you knew my mom, you would know that's her. That once she recognized that there was some kind of willingness, she facilitated everything from that point. And somehow she found this place in Florida that a month after I left, was raided and went out of business. But somehow she found this place in Florida that worked for me.
So in your description of your mom, it must be a huge loss to have her, passed away, and I can't imagine what life would be like without my mother.
Yeah.
Because my mother is the last, person older than me, other than my brother and my family.
Yeah, that's true. Because my mom was, one of the things I like to say about her is that, she loved me no matter what. A lot of times people think that, that behavior is enabling, in some way they have said that about her, but she loved me to the end. And it was her like love, her unconditional love, and her willingness to demonstrate that any way she possibly could that really led me into recovery. Because I won't say that I was hard-headed, but I was kind of resistant to any type of firm intervention. It just didn't work with me. I would kind of shut down, and it really didn't bother me, in comparison to the way I was living anyway. It was a pretty, I won't say crime-riddled life, but it was antisocial type behavior.
Because, see, I only know you as Tommy McGee, mental health counselor
right.
in recovery. So I don't know who this guy was when you were using. Who were you before you were using? Were you a street kid? Were you an innocent kid? Were you a good kid? How would you describe who you were before you started using?
Before I started using, I would say, I was a good kid. I was National Honor Society. I was a better than average athlete. I would say I was a good kid. I would say very smart, extremely athletic. I also played the drums. So I was just your, average American kid prior to starting to use.
And how did you start to use? What was the attraction, or how did it start for you?
I would say I hate to call it a trigger, but my parents divorced. But not only did my parents divorce, my grandfather was like the patriarch of our family. The patriarch in every sense, where there was a small town outside of Dallas that, my grandfather pretty much ran this town. It was all family members. I think it was a few hundred square miles that this town sat in. It's called Sandfield. It's right outside of Sulphur Springs, Texas. Anyone that's from Texas would probably not recognize the name, but it's an extremely small town. But, my grandfather was someone that I would consider my very first mentor. He taught me how to horseback ride. He taught me how to hunt. He just was the guy that kind of showed me what it meant at that time to be a man. And so at the age of 12, he passed away from lung cancer.
Wow.
And the ripple effect that it had.
Was he a smoker?
He was. Cool Filter Kings.
Cool Filter Kings were what I smoked way before, everybody's doing Newports. I'm still smoking Cool Filter Kings. That was it for me.
Right. I think Cool Filter Kings were the pre to Newports.
Well, that was the black people cigarette.
Exactly.
Cool Filter Kings. Everybody smoked Cools. Right. And I don't know how they got into Newports, but I stuck with Cools until I quit. Yeah.
Right. But I remember him saying one time, holding a cigarette, he said, these things are going to kill me. I remember, my father, him and I was standing in the garage, and he said that to my dad. And, maybe 2 years later, he was right. They ended up killing him. But there was this ripple effect in the family. I'm not sure if it was directly connected, but immediately following his death, my parents divorced. And my belief was that, my father's relationship with my grandfather was so strong because my father's father had passed away from polio when he was young, and that was, in my opinion anyway, my psychological mind, that was one of his strongest male mentors or male role models was my grandfather. And so when he died, the relationship between he and my mom it fell apart. I saw some ripples also in my aunt and uncle's relationship. So it just went to show how strong his leadership was in our family. And so, my parents divorced, and not long after that, I had my first drink. I went into a new high school at the same time.
But did you drink just out of curiosity, or did you drink for a purpose?
I think initially I drank because, again, I was National Honor Society. And so I was trying to say how I ended up going to a trade type school, high school, a school where you actually had to apply and be accepted. It's called a magnet school now. Back then, they have that in Florida. They have like the arts schools, and so I went to this high school, but I applied for it, and I was eligible because of my grades. So my grandfather died, my parents divorced, and I transitioned into a new school, which was out of the area where I grew up. So it was not around any of the people that I was comfortable or familiar with. So I'm in a new school, and the leader in my family has passed away, and my father's no longer in the home. And so it was that year that I've had my first drink. And I think, to answer your question, it was a way that it was a social lubricant, so to speak, as people say. It was like the first time I attended some major event at this new school, sophomore picnic. I drank, and that was it. It was.
You loved it.
I did. It set my reputation in school too. Some people were attracted to me because of who I was at that party, and some people were recoiled by my behavior at that party. But it set who I was from that. I mean, literally from that day forward.
From that point on.
Yeah.
Okay. And so fast forward, you got yourself into recovery. How did you get yourself into the field of addiction mental health?
There was a friend of mine. His name's Tony Dodge. He owned, at the time, a halfway house called the Genesis House. And I was like bussing tables and trying to learn how to be a chef at this restaurant. And Tony said, I want you to go to this treatment center and talk to this lady. Her name's Michelle Michael. He said, I think you'll be good at this work. And I honestly have no idea why he said that, because it's not something I was interested in. I hadn't, communicated an interest to him.
So you weren't one of those people that went through treatment and, I want to be a therapist or a counselor.
I was not that brother.
Okay.
I was not interested. I was not interested at all, but I believed in Tony Dodge. He was like Miami Vice. Remember Miami Vice,
Yeah,
that show? He was like, what's the guy's name? The blonde-haired guy in Miami Vice? I can't remember his name. But anyway, Tony Dodge looked just like this dude. He was like super cool, suave, but he was sober forever and a day. So I was willing to take any suggestions that he gave me. So I went to, at the time, it was the Wellness Resource Center. I met with Michelle. She hired me on the spot.
Really?
Yeah. And
She hired you. Did she see something in you, or we need somebody in this position?
well, it was today we call them BHTs. It
Sure.
was a tech. And as you know, we always need techs.
Always need techs, right?
So
this guy was sober. Let's let him do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think part of it was her relationship with Tony too, because I think that they were long-term friends and they had a need. Mm-hmm. I was still working in a restaurant, but I took the job as a BHT tech, and I fell in love with it. It was something about working. At the time, wellness was, they call it co-occurring, they call it dual diagnosis back then, and the patients at the Wellness Resource Center were extremely acute. It was obvious that they had some psychiatric disorders going on, and
So it was more than just the drugs.
It was more than just drugs, which made it interesting for me, because I was living in a halfway house.
Sure.
I've seen plenty of drug addicts and drunks. You know what I'm saying?
So you're living in a halfway house, working in a rehab.
Exactly.
Wow.
Like super early in recovery, no business working in treatment at all. Talk about overwhelmed. I was super overwhelmed by it. But I knew that I wanted to do something other than what I was doing. I was working. I'm laughing. I was training to be a chef, right? And the owner of the restaurant I was working in was arrested, because he tried to hire somebody to kill his wife.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
Right. I mean, so, that kind of put a little damper on working in the restaurant industry, So I knew I wanted to do something different than continue working in a restaurant. And this treatment center work at the time, it just was appealing. It was exciting, working with that population. And for me, I was learning, and that's
So
always been important.
you were early in recovery. You were working at a treatment center. You didn't really know anything about what you were doing. You were just kind of this guy. How did you feel? Did you feel adequate in your ability to do the work? Did you feel insecure?
Mm-hmm.
Did you not think about it all? I mean, that's always been my struggle.
Yeah.
In different phases of my work, my ability to feel competent and able to do the job. Sometimes I have to fake it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then other times, I'm confident, but other times I don't know what I'm doing here and just hope things work out.
Right. I mean, that's the fine line, too, with working in treatment, as far as I can remember. Because at that particular time, I would say, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would say at that particular time, I had the strongest program, when I first transitioned into working into treatment. So I did feel competent in the beginning, because I thought that all I needed to do was have that background.
Well, that was when I did my internship. That's what I had. I didn't know anything else about anything, but I knew about 12 steps and what that process was. So what I gave was what I had because I didn't have anything else.
That's right.
I didn't have any real knowledge. I had the knowledge, but I didn't know how to apply it. So I took the classes, took the courses, but I hadn't practiced any of it.
Right.
What I had practiced was what I was doing in my own recovery, and I would pass that on to others until I developed a skill set that was the next step after my basic recovery stuff that I would give people.
Right, which would be, because the recovery piece has its limitations. It's probably offensive to some people that actually hear that 12 steps has limitations. But anyway, so the 12-step piece, it got me so far, but I recognized at a certain point, it's not helping everyone.
It gets you, I think it gets you to a place where either you're going to launch and do more and get more and develop more, or you're going to stay stuck with just that, or you're going to head backwards.
Or you're going to regress.
Yep.
Absolutely. And the part of what I wanted, because again, I enjoy learning.
And let me just say, it's scary at times when you're at that point where you've gotten enough and then now have to consider doing something different.
That's right.
And so I'm going to move out of my comfort zone into something else where I'm not that competent in. I don't know. Let me just stay in this 12-step world, which sometimes can get really rigid in what I would do or would tell other people to do or suggest to other people. And they weren't really always some suggestions. They were commands. Do this, do that.
Right. I think that that happens even, as we, in personal development, I think that happens. I think that we get comfortable, complacent, and the points where we have grown to, the things, the self-awarenesses that we have, the epiphanies that we have about ourselves, the things that we've changed. I think we get to a point, to a level where we're okay with who we are as people. And then someone cracks a bit of us open, whether it has to do with some traumas that we've experienced that we haven't processed, or some defects that we have that we haven't changed. And we decide sometimes that we're okay with having those defects. We're okay with not processing those traumas because there's fear of what it might look like to do some work on those things. So I think that even happens in personal development. But you're absolutely right. It's easy to just be a tech. Mm-hmm. It's easy to, and not to take anything away from someone who has made that choice, but it's easy to know that there's so much more ability that I have available to me and not tap into that. My father used to talk about, what it meant when people would say to me that I had a lot of potential. He would say, what that means is you're not doing anything right now. He's like, so you need to take some action on the potential that you have, and now I have this sense of that, because what happened working at Wellness was that I reached a point to where I recognized that there was some patients that I was coming in contact with that I wasn't helping. That I was sharing my 12-step experience with, that I was like trying to get them through a step process, hooking them up with sponsors, seeing them at meetings, and still there were things that they had that they were suffering with, whether it was a psychiatric disorder or some mood instability, and they weren't progressing.
So is that when you went and got licensed, or?
It is, because I was in the position I was in at that particular time. I had been promoted to therapist, and so, I was supposedly doing clinical work.
So you were a therapist. Did you have a bachelor's, a master's, a CA?
Nope, I didn't have any of that.
So you were just Tommy the therapist.
I was just Tommy the therapist. Mm-hmm. My credential was
your last
I was a member of AA, my anonymous program. Yeah. And
so one of the things that says about that is Tommy has some talent, and we're going to put him in this position. Although Tommy has limits, and the clients that Tommy is treating are only going to get so far.
That's right.
And that's a dilemma, I think, I would say, for Tommy, because the agency puts you in that position.
Right.
Then you have to make some decisions about, I think it falls under the definition of integrity. Am I going to practice with integrity this limited ability, or am I going to move on so I can actually work with the people in a helpful, healthy way that I'm working with that need more than I currently have to offer?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult decision to make, depending upon your salary. Because integrity can sometimes cost you some cash, because you can say in that setting, you could say, you know what, I don't think that I'm qualified to be a therapist, and they demote you back to being a BHT. But as God had it for me, I recognize my incompetence. I mean, I just call it what it is. I recognize that I was incompetent, and a friend of mine was working at the Seminole Tribe of Florida. He was working there, and a position became available for a program that they were starting. It was called an aftercare counselor, and the qualification had to do with AA experience, 12-step experience. And so I applied for it, but I applied for it because it was less, they paid less, and it was going to be a drive, but I applied for it because I knew it fit my skill set, And
so that's what I call recovery.
Mm-hmm.
That you're willing to take less money, a longer commute, to do better.
Right.
That the instant gratification of that paycheck every other week isn't what was working for you, that you had to make less in order to make more.
That's exactly right. It's a good way to put it, too.
Yeah, I mean, when I did my internship, I had an internship 13 months, upstate New York, and they weren't paying me. I had to quit my job, move upstate New York, and I had to hustle. But I knew this was what I wanted, and I knew I could be good at it if I had the chance. So how am I going to make this work? I wrote letters to people and asked for money, and people sent money, and eventually I got a little part-time job to go with it. But what you did is the definition of what I believe people need to do, because I've seen so many people get caught up in money.
Mm.
And I'm talking in all levels of this field, from the big shot executive director, high-end programs, to the halfway houses, where they get caught up in money and the quality of care is lessened, or it's not offered, or it's just money is the other drug outside of the drugs.
It is. Oh yeah, definitely.
And,
Definitely.
listen, I've been caught up in making decisions around money.
Yeah.
But luckily, or maybe I've worked on something that it wasn't always the determining factor in what I decided to do.
Right.
That there was always another way. And at least for me, I could always feel confident that things are going to be okay regardless.
Right. Well, I mean, the transition for me was necessary. Because I knew, too, that it was going to be a reset. I'd already made up my mind that I was going back to school. I had made that decision prior to leaving wellness. I had made the decision. But I needed the space to actually get a education. I didn't want to be trying to do my education, learn how to be an actual therapist while at the same time seeing clients. I knew that wasn't fair, to the clients. I don't want to take my car to the shop and the guy that's working on my car is still in school learning how to work on cars. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah.
I don't want my car to be his internship.
So you went to the Seminole tribe. Did you have to learn about Native American culture or?
I didn't have to learn about It's funny. It's funny because I think about the conversation I had with the first tribal member that I met. It's funny because he told me, we don't care about your education. We want you to spend the time getting to know the community and learning about our culture. I mean, he was literally saying, what we want is for you to spend time walking through the community, walking through the neighborhood, learning more about the Seminole culture. That's what's important, not what you can offer us based upon your education. So that was perfect,
Sure.
So for, they had to me anyway, an unofficial type internship, because what they expected from me for 6 months was to go to the Boys and Girls Club, go to the Elder Center, spend some time at the headquarters. They literally directed me to learn more about who they were as a people and made it plain that what I was learning in school did not matter. They wanted me to build relationships, So that was perfect for what I wanted to be, not only as a employee of the tribe, but as a clinician too, which is still my style, is to get to know more about the person, as we do work together.
Sure.
So it was a perfect setup, and they supported me, not financially, but they helped me as I was getting my education. They made sure that I was able to do an internship there. I had a supervisor for my master's program that was working for the tribe as well. So that whole process supported my pursuit to become a therapist.
And how long did you work for the Seminoles?
7.5 years.
7.5 years.
Yeah.
And what did you do after that?
I went to work in a program that was for people of higher net worth. One of those like Ocean Drive, Headwaters type programs. Because what happened at the Seminole tribe was, like I had said before, I love to learn and get to know more. And at the Seminole tribe, I started as an aftercare counselor. Then I became the administrator of that program, which was the administrator for all the programming in the state of Florida. Then developed a employee program for people coming out of prison and out of treatment, like a transitional program. And then we put together a Native American convention that's held in the state of Florida. But then the program started to run itself, trained the people that were working in the program, trained the person that was my assistant. And so I didn't have anything to do. I could have just stayed, hung out, because once you have a relationship, in my opinion, once they have a relationship with you, you could just stay there.
You could stay.
But I was bored.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this other opportunity became available. Matter of fact, the former owner of the Wellness Resource Center was working at Hanley, helping to develop the Headwaters program, and gave me a call to see whether or not I'd be interested in being the first therapist there and helping them develop the program. And it was perfect timing. It was an opportunity for me to be a part of another program development and to learn about another culture.
Sure.
Because that's a whole nother
The
culture.
culture of the wealth.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did worked with 2 different programs and did program development for both of those. And the things that we did talk about is this other culture and the culture of wealth. So that was interesting. But for me, the interest in that was short-lived, where I worked for the time that I did, and it was really time for me to move on. I had other ideas of things that I wanted to do.
And I was there for a year. I was there for a year, and I got an opportunity to be clinical director in a different program. And it was a program, the immersion program, where they were infusing the 12-step process with clinical work, which is my personal experience.
Sure.
So that, sounded interesting to me. And again, it was another opportunity to be a part of program development. I just kind of like watching these visions unfold. And so this particular one, again, was, one that was close to my heart because that's my personal experience. And, both being a member of a 12-step program and at the same time, continuing to engage in my own clinical process and learning more about myself. So like coming to a relationship with Immersion and helping to put that program together and watch it grow was a phenomenal experience.
Nice.
Yeah.
So another question I want to ask you about culture, because me being black, you being black, I have worked in several programs where I have been the director of the program. I'm the director of this program in New York. I'm a director of a program here in Florida. Right. And there were other directors who were also black or African American in these programs, but the population of clients were not African American. You'd have one black client a year in these programs. And it's just an interesting kind of, sometimes an interesting position to be in, where I'm helping all of these people who are not like me.
Right.
And there's a part of me that sometimes feels like, I should be doing more for people who look like me.
Yeah.
But the situations that I got in just didn't lend itself to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I look at that too. I thought about that in the very beginning of my education. Part of what I wanted to do was to be able to offer, some of my learning to my community. And there's this like scripture that talks about, Jesus not being able to do any good in his hometown. I think about, what that looks like. I visited Dallas since I've left there, and the people that I come in contact with, they still remember me, as a hoodlum, So, and so, that is regardless of what they see on Facebook or what they read about me on Instagram or podcasts I participate in, they see me, not just their affect, but their approach to me as if I'm the guy I was 30 years ago.
Sure.
And so I understand, what that scripture means, that some of those people in particular, struggle with being able to put me in a different light and see that I can be helpful in other ways. I see some of my like high school peers and certain people from the neighborhood that have gotten sober over the years, and the communications on Facebook are admirable, but still when we come face to face, it's as if to be completely transparent, I almost see them the same way too. I see them almost as the person or people that they were prior to us getting sober. So I understand as it relates to where I am today, in my private practice, because I transitioned out of agency work into private practice. I work with a lot of minorities, a lot of people that look like us, mostly couples. And what I have to say is that at times, that process is difficult. I can feel a certain amount of frustration, and I think it is countertransference. I think it is, I want for my community what I've seen other communities that you and I have been directors of, other communities that I've helped, get that sense of peace, and safety that I've helped them get. And I've seen how my community struggles with that.
Sure.
So it's like I want them to have it now. And I feel myself getting frustrated with their resistance.
So what do you think the resistance is about? What do you think gets in the way of them experiencing the comfort or the change that you're talking about?
Frequently, for me, what happens is that I recognize their inexperience with the process of therapy. I think a lot of times they want this thing to happen now. They get frustrated with the idea that we may be looking at a month worth of couple sessions. We may be looking at a couple of months of individual sessions. Mm-hmm. The idea, the want that they have is,
and
I'm
let
here
me
today.
tell you, a month of couple sessions isn't that long.
It's not.
I mean,
an hour.
Yeah.
4 sessions.
Yeah, 4 hours a month.
4 hours,
Yeah.
right. But I can tell that the expectation is that we have it today.
Get it done. Let's have this consult. Tell me what to do, and then we're gone. And there's a piece about the money. I don't want to spend the money.
That's right.
Or insurance doesn't pay for it. I'm not doing it.
That's right. Not seeing the investment, the payoff for that investment, the immediate
not seeing
payoff.
The value in that.
Yes.
So there's value
Right.
maybe in a car, and there's a value in all of these other things. But I ain't paying to talk to somebody.
Therapy.
I can go to church. Well, I don't know how that worked.
That's a big piece of it. That's a huge piece of it. I've heard that before too. That I've heard that from pastors before. That my congregation, the people in my congregation, they come see me. For pastoral counseling.
Who has very little knowledge or understanding of the brain and how it works and the intermingling of chemicals in the brain and all of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that my father's a pastor, and there's a lot of preachers in our family. My cousin, his name was E.K. Bailey, was a pretty big name in Dallas when it came to the ministry. Extremely talented too. He was like my father's father in the ministry. And so, I came from this long line of church folk.
Mm-hmm.
And so my undergrad is in theology, in ministry. And I, spent some time like in the pulpit and preaching. So I get the culture of like church culture. I get religious culture. I get how, there's this expectation, that God will heal all things. And so that idea that they need to come to a therapist to process these old memories. Why can't I just turn this over to God and have him heal me? Maybe what I need is a better commitment with my church family and to pay my tithes on time. And that is how I'll feel better. And I don't really say that in jest, but kinda.
But I always tell people, faith moves mountains, but bring a shovel.
Exactly.
Because there's work that you have to do. And if you believe in God, okay, why did God send you to my office?
There you go. That's
so
right.
if God sends you to my office, I think there may be some value in what I'm offering you. And if you want to, oh no, I got enough, I know what I need to do now, go ahead and do that.
Right.
But you'll probably come back. So I like to leave the door open for people who kind of have that rigid view, or that maybe it's fear of walking through that door in an area that they don't know anything about. They become vulnerable in a different way, and it doesn't always feel safe to open up and explore those areas that they've been kind of waiting for God to lift
from
them.
Well, and there's some accountability, when it comes to the whole, I'll just say religious experience. All of the religions that I'm familiar with have some accountability, with how the participants of that religion conduct themselves, whether that accountability be to their God or to other members of those particular, religions. And so that's part of what I point to, when people are talking about only praying to God. I ask them, what about the relationship that you have with your wife? What would he expect your behavior to look like, when it comes to your wife? And how would he expect you to be held accountable and responsible to that behavior? And so maybe I'm part of his intent as far as helping you learn how to be a better husband or a better partner in that relationship. And so what are you willing to invest? And I'm not talking about financially. What are you willing to invest of yourself to become a better Christian or Muslim or Buddhist? What are you willing to invest to become better at that? Mm-hmm. To help people see that there's to give them some insight into exactly what you just said, that it's one of the things that I like, a saying that I like is that, so many people are so heavenly bound, but no earthly good. Mm-hmm. That they have this idea about what this deity is supposed to be in their life, but their behaviors here on earth are deplorable. Mm-hmm. It's like, so what are you doing right now to be a better human?
And isn't the right now the only thing that's real?
That's it. That's it.
There may not be a heaven. For all we know is what we got right here and now. So waiting for something down the road, you don't know what's down there. I know what's right here.
Yep.
And so maybe there's this unconscious avoidance of the work that I need to do right now. There's something about right now that doesn't happen because of, I don't know if it's fear or what. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Heaven is right here.
Right.
And we can enjoy this here and now as it is. And I personally believe there is a God outside of me, but there also is God within me. Mm-hmm. And it is me, and how do I tap into that godliness within me? Mm-hmm. And then how do I practice it? So I move, I like to call it my spirituality. That I'm trying. It's a challenge. It's difficult. It's hard, and it also, at least for me, it's hard to find people that I can align with and work with and grow with. In all aspects mm-hmm. of recovery, for me personally, it's really hard to find those people. They're out there,
I agree.
But it's a challenge.
Right.
Because oftentimes, even the clients that I work with, they're hanging out with these people for years and years and years, and nobody's growing, but they don't want to let go because, well, listen, this has been somebody I've been hanging out with for a long time.
That's what's common. Mm-hmm.
We all have to move on, and sometimes we have to leave people alone for good, and sometimes those people have to wait and they can catch up later. But there's a lot of work that we all have to do that we're responsible for, just walking through that next door.
That's, I've tried to point out to, like what, I hate saying our community, but I try to point out with the minorities that I work with, that particular piece, is taking a look at, there's this book, it's called Concentric Circles of Concern. What it has to do with is taking a real close look at the people you surround yourself with. I do something that's similar, where I help people map out, what their closest connections are and what the people in that environment or what that in that community are actually doing for themselves and what they contribute to the identified client or patient, so mm-hmm. to speak, and specifically with minorities and the black people that I work with, is taking a look at whether or not they're helping you grow or they're helping you to regress. I always say to them, there's really truly no neutral. It's not as if you just kind of stay in the same place, because, humans evolve, so either we are evolving and moving in a positive direction or we're regressing into a negative direction. Who are you surrounding yourself with?
There's very few people really who are standing still.
That's right.
You're either going in one way or the other way.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. But I know too that, one of the things that the people that I'm coming in contact with some frequency, they're not really into this whole insight idea. They are okay with gaining some insight, but they also want to know, so what can I do practically to start making some kind of gain, to start progressing? And so they want tools. I've had people actually ask, clients ask, so what are some tools that I can implement that will help me make these progresses, to make these gains? And I won't say recently, but since I went into private practice, one of the things that I've started to work real close with is like giving my clients like worksheets and lots of homework so that they can see the gains that they can make and that we can put it on some kind of continuum so that they can make progress. Mm-hmm. As far as our community is concerned, I've noticed that that is something that they truly appreciate and they see value in. Because they can see, in 2 weeks' time, I've gone from point A and I'm at point D. And I can see that on some kind of scale as opposed to this insight that I've gained about myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, insight alone doesn't do very much.
Right. Step one.
It is, if you give people work and they do the work, on some level, then you'll gain the insight.
Exactly.
But you're not going to gain the insight and then do the work. So the action is what counts to get to the result that you're looking for.
And one of the things I've started to really enjoy is like working with couples and families.
So when you say couples and families, are you talking about mom, dad, son, daughter, all in the same room at the same time, or
a combination of both? Couples is a spouse or a partner.
Sure.
And then families are like mom, dad, daughters, what I would like. Mom, dad, daughter, sons. What I would like to start doing some work with is mom, dad, daughter, son, grandparents, friends, is really do some work with the full community. Because I believe that everyone that contributes to the dynamic, if they have some kind of work, if they've done some work.
So those are weekend workshops then?
I would like to do like intensives.
All of those people together.
Yeah, I would like to do 3 or 4 day intensives. That's the direction I want to move in 2026. I just see the benefit that it has with working. But the largest number I've worked with so far is 4. And I see the benefit of working with the 4, how they can actually have some movement. I can only imagine, if you can work with the entire tribe or community and what kind of movement you can get from that.
Sure, yeah.
Because that, I just see how important it is for there to be cultural change, changes in the full dynamic. I like the, the visual that you do, the skit that you do when it comes to family dynamics.
The ACOA.
Right.
Yeah, the family, family roles.
Right. I just I talk a lot about that when I'm working with clients, not just clients from addiction, but just people period, and how one piece in the family dynamic can control the entire balance in that dynamic, and how that balance does not necessarily have to be positive, and how just removing a single piece from it doesn't necessarily change that dynamic, how necessary it is for everyone in that unit to be willing to do some work.
Mm-hmm. But, one of the things that I believe is if one member of the family changes, it forces everybody else to change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I can get just one in that process, others will follow. They'll either follow or drop off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so this year, that's kind of like my focus, is how can, we start to work towards getting families to develop an appetite for change.
Appetite for change. And also, if we put the energy into the family rather than, 75% the addict or alcoholic and 25% the family.
Right, exactly.
If we can include the addict alcoholic in the family as an equal and start working, because the family tends to be at a disadvantage because they've gotten less help all along.
That's right.
So when the addict goes to treatment, the family gets that one phone call a week, where the addict alcoholic has gotten 24-hour, 7-day-a-week help. Right. And literally can manipulate the family with good stuff, good information to their advantage, where the family needs to really catch up and transition from just family member to recovery. That mom, dad are now in recovery. They don't have a drug problem, but they actually do have a drug problem, which is that loved one.
Right.
Because they have the same, everything the addict or alcoholic goes through, the family goes through. Headaches, concentration problems, eating too much, eating too little, intimacy problems, isolation, that whole list that the addict goes through, the family goes through also, but they have traditionally gotten less care for themselves in that process.
Right. Yeah, that the like the criteria for, how we diagnose someone with a substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder. Yeah, if families were to look at that using the addict as the substance, they would see that they fit the exact same criteria.
Sure.
I think a lot of times that they are resistant to being able to see that piece, to admitting
because
that.
I've been there to help. What what now you're blaming me, or there's something wrong with
the blame
me.
Question. Yep.
Well, yeah, there is. And don't you want to get better?
That question it sounds easy to answer, but I think a lot of times it would be hard for people to admit that they don't necessarily want to get better. I mean, it's easy to have a villain in the family.
Sure, yeah. And so there's a certain freedom that's gained in recovery that oftentimes, it's just, I know moms and dads that haven't gone on vacations. And, well, I don't want to be out of the country because what if something happens? So there's a freedom to be able to go out of the country, go on vacation, and enjoy your life without worrying about somebody and what they're doing or not doing.
Right.
Yeah,
I was thinking about a particular family where the addict pretty much navigates whatever happens in the family, including the vacations.
Well, let me just say about the vacations, right? As an addict, when I was addicted, I couldn't go on vacations because I didn't know where I'd get my drug, so I would never go anywhere, right? Families are in the same position. They can't go anywhere because their drug, they've got to monitor their drug.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Or they got to make sure that that person's in a good mental or emotional state if they're going to be inviting someone over. So a lot of times they'll only invite people over who are familiar with the person's condition and can accept the person's condition.
And, sometimes I tell people statistically, if you let go, your loved one probably isn't going to die tomorrow.
Right.
Something terrible probably isn't going to. I can't guarantee that. You get to choose what you do. But if your fears were real, half of the population would be dead now. And that doesn't happen. Now, they can die under your watch, or they can die on their own, and they can recover without your constant monitoring. Because if your monitoring worked, we wouldn't have this conversation. If your controlling behavior worked, we wouldn't have to talk about this. And I get not wanting to let your loved one go. But what are you losing in the process, and who else is losing when you're overly focused on this one person? You got 3 kids,
right?
But the one that you're focused,
I think about if by looking at it from both lenses, I think about the addict who resigns themselves to the fact that that they will always be an addict. Who kind of gives in to the disease and says to themselves, I'm never going to get sober. This is just the way that I'm going to go to my doom living this lifestyle. And I think about that as it relates to families, because I know I've met families that have resigned themselves that the addict that's in their life is not going to get better, and their conditions, their environmental conditions, are not going to get better, that they are going to go to their doom, enabling this person and doing the best that they possibly can to control their destiny. And they're going to have to sacrifice relationships with extended family. They're going to have to give up vacations. They're not going to have the kind of freedoms that they think they and know that they deserve, that this is going to be their life because this person is not going to get better. So it's like, how do you go about changing that mentality in a family that's already decided that this is the way we're going to be?
It's an interesting process because the example of the addict or alcoholic who winds up in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and the progression for the family is such that they get to a point where I wish he'd get arrested because then I'd know he was safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The addict or the alcoholic who's just going to die an addict, and the family's process to get to a point where, you know what, I wish he was just dead.
Right.
Because then it would be over. We're suffering, he's suffering. And it gets to those places where those are the last things that you'd want to happen. And now you're hoping for them to happen because the disease for some people puts them in a position of just absolute hopelessness. If there's not, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily a train.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's providing people with that hope and understanding that things can get better.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes it gets harder before it gets easier.
Right.
And I believe you just have to help people understand that to get, you just handhold them till they get to that point. Because I know you and I know myself, I have thousands of people who are happy and grateful in recovery. And in their process over 10 or 15 years, there's been some slips, but they've been able to get back up, get back on the horse and improve their lives and experience the freedom that recovery offers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know that, with the addict or alcoholic, we know that moment of clarity, that there's like this neurological process that happens when addicts and alcoholics experience the moment of clarity. We know that, after they've had this night out on the town, and that they wake up miserable, that there's this point that they are conscious again, and they have that part of their brain, the executive functioning part of their brain, that goes back online. We consider that moment of clarity, that opportunity, that they even talk about in the big book, when we can actually intervene on that person, and there's a possibility that they may buy into this opportunity for recovery. The thing I think about is when we're trying to intervene on the collective, the family or the spouse and siblings, and we're looking for them to have a moment of clarity, where they're so bought into the disease of the identified patient that even their logical part of their brain is offline. It's like trying to find a period or time when all of them have this moment of clarity, and we can intervene and have them, whether it's Marchman Act or like send the person to treatment or whatever it is that we know they need, what action we know they need to take so that this person can heal. And sometimes for me, that's what's tricky, is that you'll have the dad that's like, yep, we need to get him the treatment. And the mom's like, well, not yet. And then you have the time where the mom's like, yep, this is the perfect opportunity. And dad is like, maybe we need to give it a day. It's like really getting them all on the same page at the same time can be what's laborious,
This is, I'm working with a family doing an intervention. We're ready to do the intervention. And I get a call from the family. Oh, well, he decided to start going to meetings, so we're going to hold this off.
Right.
And I let them know we were just on the road to recovery, and you have now relapsed because you're trusting what a person is telling you who has let you down 100 times before, who is 3 days abstinent and telling you, oh, I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm not saying you have to do an intervention tomorrow, but we need to stay in this process together. You don't just, end and we'll wait till he gets better. No, this is an ongoing process. So whatever he's going to do, you ought to be doing too. And that, what you ought to be doing is continuing to work with me until we see how this thing plays out.
Yeah.
Because we want to see consistency over time, not a change one day and then it changes back 4 weeks later.
Right. I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's like keeping them on that path, and doing the work that's necessary to keep them on the path. That work can be constant.
Yeah.
To keep them on that path.
Yeah.
Because, addicts and alcoholics, being one, are extremely intuitive. I can feel when you're about to intervene on me.
Sure.
So I know.
Well, apparently this guy knew it, and let me start going to those meetings again and get these people off my back.
Exactly. And families want to believe that. They want to believe.
Well, they
that he's
want to
invested in
believe
the
that,
change.
but I also think unconsciously they are afraid of what they're going to have to do differently. It was easier to just
avoid.
Yeah. Now, when I have to set boundaries, that's what's going to be hard.
That's right.
Because he's pulling at my heartstrings, and I want to help him, and I got to say no 1,000 times, and I can't say yes, even though I want to.
Right.
So, Tommy, I think we've run out of time. It's been great having you. This is a great discussion, and hopefully we can come back and do it again. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing, a little bit about, your practice, how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah. I mean, so like I was saying, for 2026, most of my work is working with couples and families. But of course, I also do a lot of individual work. I specialize in substance use disorders, whether that's alcoholism or drug abuse, as well as psychiatric disorders. I infuse some of my spiritual education if necessary. I mean, if not, I don't do so. How someone can reach me, they can either email me at balancematters@outlook.com, or they can call me at 561-223-1746, or they can go on to my website, which is TommyMcGee.com.
What about Facebook, Instagram, anything?
My Instagram is balance_matters. And I do have Facebook. I do have Balance Matters as my Facebook handle as well.
Okay. And you also do EMDR.
I do.
Is that
I
correct?
do trauma work, utilizing EMDR.
Okay, great. So great having you, Tommy. And we'll talk soon.
I appreciate it.
All right. You got it. Yep. This episode is sponsored by Guardian Recovery. If you or someone you love is struggling with addiction or mental health challenges, Guardian can help. Visit guardianrecovery.com or call the number below for confidential support and guidance.